From a cartoonist's morbid fascination with graveyards to Raul Julia's eye literally falling out on set, the Addams family's journey from comic strip to pop culture phenomenon is filled with bizarre coincidences, cursed productions, and shocking secrets that would make even Wednesday smile. These creepy, kooky facts reveal the twisted reality behind America's most beloved macabre family, including the strange inspiration for their mansion, the lawsuit that almost killed the franchise, and the disturbing truth about baby Pubert. Fact 1. Charles Addams' childhood cemetery obsession. Most people remember Charles Addams as the brilliant cartoonist who created the Addams Family, but few know that his fascination with death and the macabre began when he was just a child growing up in Westfield, New Jersey. While other kids were playing with toys or riding bicycles, young Charles spent countless hours wandering through the Presbyterian Cemetery on Mountain Avenue, letting his imagination run wild as he wondered what it would be like to be dead. According to author and Addams expert Ron McCloskey, Charles would walk among the tombstones and gravestones, studying the names and dates while his mind conjured up stories about the people buried beneath his feet. But what makes this even more fascinating is that he didn't just daydream about these deceased souls. She actually brought a sketchbook with him and drew pictures of what he imagined they looked like. These early drawings of the dead would later become the foundation for his darkly humorous artistic style that made the Addams Family possible. This morbid childhood hobby wasn't seen as strange by his family, especially his father, who actively encouraged Charles to pursue his artistic interests. His father recognized that his son had a unique perspective on the world and supported his drawing from an early age. Charles would go on to create cartoons for his high school yearbook called Weathervane, and friends later remembered that his sense of humor was always a little different from everyone else's. The influence of those cemetery visits can be seen throughout Charles Addams' later work. In his original Addams Family cartoons, the family lived on Cemetery Ridge with what he described as a dreadful view, and death was always treated as something natural and even amusing rather than frightening. That childhood fascination with graveyards and mortality became the creative spark that would eventually entertain millions of people around the world. Fact 2. The TV show props were all stolen. When the Addams Family television series was canceled in 1966 after just 2 seasons, something truly bizarre happened that would have made the family themselves proud. Every single one of their weird and wonderful props mysteriously vanished from the studio lot. The original TV series was famous for filling the Addams mansion with the most unusual and macabre decorations you could imagine, and these props were actually valuable collector's items mixed in with completely bizarre creations that existed nowhere else on Earth. The stolen items included some truly unforgettable pieces that helped make the show so memorable. There was a mounted swordfish head that had a human leg sticking out of its mouth, which was prominently displayed in the family's living room as if it were perfectly normal home decor. They also lost a stuffed 2-headed giant tortoise that sat in the corner like any ordinary family might display a houseplant. The theme song even mentioned that their house was a museum, and this turned out to be more accurate than anyone realized because many of the items were genuine collector's pieces that had real value. What makes this theft even more interesting is that it happened right after the show's cancellation, suggesting that someone either saw an opportunity when the studio was clearing out, or perhaps the items were taken by cast or crew members who wanted to keep a piece of the show they had worked on. The variety of objects that disappeared was staggering, ranging from antique furniture and genuine collector's items to one-of-a-kind props that were specially created just for the series. Unfortunately, none of these iconic props have ever been recovered, which means that pieces of television history are sitting in someone's private collection or were possibly sold off individually over the years. The loss of these items represents one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in television production history. Fact 3. Raul Julia's eye literally fell out on set. One of the most shocking incidents during the filming of the Addams Family movie happened to Raul Julia, the actor who played the passionate family patriarch Gomez Addams. After a long day of shooting, Julia decided to go out and unwind. But what happened next was something that sounds like it came straight out of a horror movie. During his evening out, a blood vessel in his eye suddenly burst, causing his eyeball to literally fall out of its socket and dangle from the optical nerve. What makes this story even more incredible is how Julia handled the situation. Instead of panicking or screaming for help, he calmly caught his own eyeball and pushed it back into place, as if this was just another minor inconvenience in his day. The incident was serious enough that it required medical attention, but Julia's cool response to such a terrifying situation showed the same kind of unflappable character that made him perfect for playing Gomez Addams. When word of this bizarre accident reached the cast and crew the next morning, they decided to have a little fun with their leading man. Angelica Houston, who played Morticia, took it upon herself to call every joke shop in Los Angeles to buy as many pairs of those novelty glasses as she could find, the ones with the fake eyeballs that pop out on springs. When Julia arrived on set the following day, he was greeted by the entire cast and crew wearing these ridiculous glasses, with fake eyeballs bouncing around everywhere he looked. Rather than being offended or upset by the prank, Julia found the whole thing hilarious and laughed along with everyone else. This good-natured response to both the accident and the joke that followed perfectly captured the spirit of camaraderie that existed among the Addams Family cast during production. Fact 4. Baby Pubert was actually twin girls. When Addams Family Values introduced the newest member of the spooky clan in 1993, audiences were charmed by baby Pubert Addams, the mustachioed infant son of Gomez and Morticia, who became a key part of the sequel's plot. What viewers didn't realize while watching this adorable yet bizarre baby on screen is that Pubert was actually played by twin girls named Caitlin Hooper and Kristen Hooper, who are now in their 20s and probably have some very unique stories to tell about their early acting careers. The filmmakers chose twin girls for several practical reasons that had nothing to do with gender but everything to do with California's strict child labor laws. Babies under 2 years old can only work for 2 hours per day on film sets, so using twins effectively doubled the amount of time they could film scenes with the baby character. This is actually a common practice in Hollywood, with famous examples including the babies who played Ross's son Ben on Friends and Lily on Modern Family. But it's still surprising to learn that the mustached boy baby was actually 2 girls. The transformation required some clever movie magic to make the switch work convincingly. The makeup team had to tint the twins' naturally lighter hair to make it appear darker and more in line with the Addams family's signature black locks. The most memorable part of Pubert's appearance, his distinctive mustache, was simply drawn on with makeup each day of filming. To get the babies to crawl in the right direction during scenes, the crew came up with a creative solution by tying Cheerios to strings and using them to guide the twins where they needed to go. The name Pubert itself has an interesting backstory, as it was actually Charles Addams' original choice for what the character Pugsley would be called before television producers in the 1960s rejected it as too inappropriate for family television. Fact 5. The TV set was bright pink. One of the most surprising secrets about the original Addams Family television series from the 1960s is that the supposedly dark and gloomy mansion was actually decorated in the brightest, most cheerful colors you could imagine. While viewers at home saw everything in appropriately spooky black and white tones that perfectly matched the family's macabre lifestyle, the actual film set was painted in vibrant shades of bright pink and red that would have looked more at home in a children's playroom than a haunted house. This wasn't some kind of mistake or artistic choice by the set designer. It was actually a technical necessity that came from the way black and white television cameras worked in the 1960s. The film equipment of that era had trouble distinguishing between different dark colors when everything was converted to grayscale, so if the set had been painted in the blacks, grays, and other dark shades that viewers expected to see, everything would have appeared as a flat, muddy mess on screen, with no contrast or visual interest. The production team discovered that by painting the walls and furniture in these unexpectedly bright colors, they could create the perfect contrast and depth that would translate beautifully into the black and white footage that audiences would eventually see. The bright pink walls would appear as the perfect shade of gray on camera, while red accents would show up as darker tones that added visual texture and helped define different areas of the room. This created a completely surreal experience for anyone who visited the set during filming, because they would walk into what was supposed to be a creepy, gothic mansion, and instead find themselves surrounded by colors that belonged more in a cotton candy factory. The contrast between the cheerful appearance of the actual set and the appropriately spooky atmosphere that came through on television was so dramatic that it became one of the most memorable behind-the-scenes stories from the show's production. Fact 6. Thing was played by multiple people. Thing, the mysterious disembodied hand that helped the Addams family with various tasks around their mansion, was one of the most memorable characters from the original television series, but creating this seemingly simple character actually required more behind-the-scenes coordination than most viewers ever realized. While most people assume that Thing was always performed by the same person throughout the show's run, the reality is that this iconic hand belonged to at least 2 different actors depending on what was happening in each particular scene. The primary performer behind Thing was Ted Cassidy, the same 6'9" actor who played the towering butler Lurch and delivered the famous line, "You rang," in his deep, booming voice. Cassidy would stick his hand through specially designed boxes and openings in tables, walls, and other furniture to bring Thing to life, and he became quite skilled at making the hand express emotions and personality through gestures alone. However, this arrangement created an obvious problem whenever the script called for both Thing and Lurch to appear in the same scene together, since one person obviously couldn't be in 2 places at once. When these situations arose, the production team had to get creative with their casting choices. Assistant director Jack Vogelin would step in to perform as Thing, crawling under tables and reaching through the various openings while Cassidy stood tall as the imposing Lurch. This tag team approach worked so well that most viewers never noticed the difference, even though the 2 men's hands probably looked quite different up close. Interestingly, Ted Cassidy sometimes added his own little touches to the performance by occasionally using his left hand instead of his right hand, just to see if anyone would notice the switch. This playful experimentation shows how much thought and creativity went into bringing even the smallest characters to life during the show's production. Fact 7. John Astin's pockets were lined with asbestos. One of the most dangerous behind-the-scenes safety measures from the original Addams Family television series involved John Astin's portrayal of the cigar-loving patriarch Gomez Addams, and a solution that absolutely never be allowed on any film set today. Astin's version of Gomez was famous for his eccentric habit of casually placing lit cigars into his jacket pockets as if they were completely harmless objects, which created a memorable character quirk that perfectly captured Gomez's carefree and slightly reckless personality. The problem was that this signature move created a very real fire hazard on set, since putting burning cigars into fabric pockets would normally result in singed clothing at best and serious fires at worst. The prop department needed to find a way to make this character trait safe to perform repeatedly during filming, especially since Astin was actually a cigar smoker in real life and wanted to use real lit cigars rather than fake props to make his performance more authentic and believable. Their solution was to line the inside of Gomez's jacket pockets with asbestos, a fireproof material that was commonly used in the 1960s for insulation and fire prevention before anyone understood how dangerous it was to human health. This allowed Astin to safely drop lit cigars into his pockets without any risk of burning himself or setting his costume on fire, and the audience never knew that anything unusual was happening behind the scenes. Of course, we now know that asbestos exposure can cause serious lung diseases and cancer, which makes this safety measure seem incredibly reckless by today's standards. Back in the 1960s, however, asbestos was considered a miracle material for preventing fires, and the production team thought they had found the perfect solution to keep their lead actor safe while maintaining the authenticity of his character's bizarre habits. Fact 8. Michael Jackson's song was scrapped. One of the most significant behind-the-scenes stories from Addams Family Values involves a collaboration that never made it to the big screen. featuring none other than the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson. The production team had commissioned Jackson to write and record a song called Is It Scary, specifically for the 1993 sequel, and Jackson had already completed both the song and an accompanying music video that was designed to promote the film and tie into its spooky themes. The timing of this collaboration seemed perfect, as Jackson's gothic and supernatural imagery in many of his previous music videos made him an ideal fit for the Addams Family's macabre world. The song itself was meant to capture the eerie atmosphere of the movie, while showcasing Jackson's distinctive style, and the completed music video was reportedly ready to be used as part of the film's marketing campaign when everything suddenly fell apart. Unfortunately for everyone involved, the project became impossible to continue when Jackson faced serious legal troubles in 1993. Child molestation allegations surfaced against the pop star during the same time period when the song and video were supposed to be released, creating a public relations nightmare that made it impossible for the family-friendly Addams Family movie to maintain any association with Jackson. Making matters even more complicated were ongoing contract disputes between Jackson and Paramount Pictures, since Jackson already had existing agreements with the studio that created conflicts with the new Addams Family project. The combination of these legal issues and the serious allegations against Jackson forced the studio to make the difficult decision to completely remove his song and music video from the film, despite the time and money that had already been invested in the collaboration. The song Is It Scary was eventually released years later on other Jackson projects, but it never became part of the Addams Family legacy as originally planned. Fact 9. The movie had a pervasive black cloud. The production of the 1991 Addams Family movie was plagued by so many strange accidents and health problems that director Barry Sonnenfeld later described feeling like there was a pervasive black cloud hanging over the entire project. What started as a promising film shoot quickly turned into a series of bizarre incidents that would have been perfectly at home in one of the family's own supernatural adventures, making everyone involved wonder if they were dealing with some kind of curse. The trouble began just 3 weeks into filming, when Sonnenfeld himself became the first casualty of the production's apparent bad luck. While discussing budget concerns with a studio executive, the first-time director suddenly felt what he described as tremendous pressure in his chest, as if someone was blowing up a balloon inside him, and then collapsed unconscious on the set. This fainting incident was serious enough to halt production and left everyone shaken about their director's health and ability to continue with the demanding shoot. The problems didn't stop there, as the film's cinematographer Owen Roizman decided to quit the production shortly after Sonnenfeld's collapse to work on another movie instead. His replacement, Gail Tattersall, seemed like the solution to their camera problems until he developed a severe sinus infection that required hospitalization, forcing him to leave the project as well and never return. This left Sonnenfeld in the unusual position of having to serve as his own cinematographer while also directing the film. The final incident that convinced everyone the production was cursed was when Raul Julia's eye literally fell out of its socket due to a burst blood vessel during his time off from filming. When combined with all the other health emergencies and departures, this created an atmosphere where cast and crew genuinely believed they were working under some kind of supernatural influence that would have made the Addams family themselves proud. Fact 10. Charles Addams retouched corpse photos. Long before Charles Addams became famous for creating the Addams Family cartoons, he had one of the most unusual jobs in magazine publishing that perfectly foreshadowed his later fascination with death and the macabre. In 1933, Addams joined the layout department of True Detective magazine, where his primary responsibility was retouching photographs of actual corpses to make them suitable for publication alongside the magazine's crime stories. True Detective was a popular publication that featured real criminal cases and investigations, which meant they often needed to include crime scene photographs as part of their storytelling. However, these images were usually too graphic and disturbing for general audiences, so the magazine hired artists like Addams to clean them up and remove the most shocking details. His specific job was to carefully airbrush and edit out blood, wounds, and other gory elements from corpse photos to make them acceptable for readers while still maintaining enough detail to support the magazine's stories. What makes this job particularly interesting in relation to Addams' later career is his attitude toward the work he was doing. Rather than being disturbed or uncomfortable with handling these morbid images on a daily basis, Addams actually found himself frustrated by the censorship requirements. He famously complained to his colleagues that many of the corpses were actually more interesting and visually compelling in their original, unretouched state, before he had to remove all the blood and graphic details. This early professional experience with death imagery clearly influenced his artistic development and helped shape the darkly humorous perspective that would later make the Addams Family so popular. Working with corpse photographs on a regular basis gave Addams a unique comfort level with mortality and the macabre that most artists never develop, and this comfort translated directly into his ability to create characters who found death amusing rather than frightening. Fact 11. Wednesday's bed position was Christina Ricci's idea. One of the most memorable and perfectly creepy visual elements from the Addams Family movie came from the creative mind of 10-year-old Christina Ricci herself, who was playing the eternally gloomy Wednesday Addams. During filming of a scene where Wednesday was being tucked into bed, Ricci made a spontaneous decision that would become one of the character's most iconic and disturbing traits, showing that even as a child, she had an instinctive understanding of what made Wednesday so unsettling. The scene called for Wednesday to be lying in bed as any normal child would, but Ricci felt that this ordinary sleeping position didn't capture the essence of her character's morbid personality. Without any direction from the filmmakers, she decided to fold her arms across her chest in the same position that corpses are arranged in when they're being prepared for burial or lying in a coffin during a funeral service. This small but significant change transformed what would have been a routine bedtime scene into something genuinely eerie that perfectly reflected Wednesday's fascination with death. Director Barry Sonnenfeld and the other adults on set immediately recognized that Ricci had stumbled onto something brilliant that enhanced her character in a way that no adult had thought to suggest. The pose looked so natural and fitting for Wednesday that they kept it in the movie, and it became one of the most talked-about visual details that audiences remembered long after leaving the theater. What makes this story even more impressive is that Ricci was just 10 years old when she came up with this idea, showing a level of creative insight and understanding of her character that many adult actors never achieve. Angelica Houston, who played Morticia, later confirmed that this sleeping position was entirely Ricci's improvisation, and praised the young actress for her instinctive grasp of what made Wednesday Addams so memorably disturbing. Fact 12. Lurch's famous line was ad-libbed. One of the most recognizable catchphrases in television history almost never happened, and it exists today only because actor Ted Cassidy decided to ignore his script and improvise during filming of the original Addams Family television series. When Cassidy was first cast as Lurch, the towering 6'9" butler who served the Addams family, the character was written to be completely silent throughout the entire show, communicating only through groans, grunts, and physical gestures that would emphasize his role as a mysterious and somewhat frightening servant. The original concept for Lurch was that he would be more like a living piece of furniture than a fully developed character, existing primarily to open doors, carry heavy objects, and loom ominously in the background, while the main family members delivered all the dialogue and comedy. The writers felt that keeping him silent would make him more mysterious and unsettling, fitting perfectly with the show's gothic atmosphere and the family's collection of unusual household staff members. However, during filming of the pilot episode, there was a scene where the family rang their servant bell to summon Lurch to help them with something. When Cassidy appeared on camera in response to the bell, he spontaneously delivered the line, "You rang," in his distinctive, deep, booming voice that perfectly matched his imposing physical presence. The line wasn't written in the script, and nobody had asked him to speak, but Cassidy felt that the moment called for some kind of verbal response. The cast, crew, and producers were so delighted by this unexpected addition that they immediately decided to rewrite Lurch's character to include speaking parts throughout the rest of the series. This single moment of improvisation transformed Lurch from a background prop into one of the show's most memorable characters, and "You rang?" became his signature phrase that fans still quote today. Fact 13. Christopher Lloyd borrowed a fat suit. Christopher Lloyd's transformation into the rotund and eccentric Uncle Fester required more than just makeup and acting skills. It also involved borrowing a very famous piece of movie costume history from one of the greatest films ever made. Lloyd, who was known for playing tall and lanky characters like the wild-haired Doc Brown in the Back to the Future movies, needed to completely change his body shape to convincingly portray Gomez's portly brother, who had been living away from the family for 25 years. The solution came from an unexpected source when Lloyd managed to borrow the exact same fat suit that actor Bruno Kirby had worn in Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather, Part 2, where Kirby played a young version of the character Fat Pete Clemenza. This wasn't just any random costume piece, it was a prop from one of the most acclaimed movies in cinema history, making Lloyd's use of it a fascinating connection between two completely different film genres. The fat suit worked perfectly for creating Uncle Fester's distinctive appearance, but it had to be carefully hidden under Lloyd's character's signature long black trench coat throughout the entire movie. This meant that Lloyd was essentially wearing two full costumes at once during filming, which must have been incredibly hot and uncomfortable under the bright movie lights, especially during the longer shooting days that stretched for weeks during production. What makes this costume choice even more interesting is that both Lloyd and Kirby were actors who naturally had much slimmer builds than the characters they were playing, so they both needed the same type of padding to achieve the heavier appearance that their roles required. Rather than creating a new fat suit specifically for the Addams Family, the costume department found it much more practical and cost-effective to reuse this proven Hollywood prop that had already been perfected for a major studio production. Fact 14. The New Yorker banned Addams Family comics. One of the most surprising conflicts in publishing history occurred when the Addams Family became a television sensation in the 1960s, creating an unexpected rift between Charles Addams and the New Yorker magazine that had been his professional home for over 30 years. William Shawn, who served as the magazine's editor during this period, made the unusual decision to completely ban any new Addams Family cartoons from appearing in the magazine's pages, even though these characters had originally been created specifically for the New Yorker and had helped establish the publication's reputation for sophisticated dark humor. This ban was particularly strange because Shawn didn't have any problem with Charles Addams himself or his artistic abilities, and he continued to publish all of Addams' other cartoon work throughout the television series run from 1964 to 1966. The New Yorker still welcomed Addams' non-family cartoons, including his other macabre and humorous illustrations that featured different characters and situations, but anything involving Morticia, Gomez, Wednesday, Pugsley, Uncle Fester, or any other member of the television family was strictly forbidden. The reasoning behind this editorial decision seems to have been Shawn's belief that publishing Addams Family cartoons would make the New Yorker appear to be cashing in on the television show's popularity rather than maintaining its reputation as a sophisticated literary magazine that set cultural trends rather than following them. Shawn apparently felt that featuring characters who were now appearing on television every week would lower the magazine's status and make it seem like they were simply riding the coattails of a popular TV series. Ironically, this ban continued even after the television series was canceled in 1966, meaning that Charles Addams was never again able to publish new adventures of his most famous creations in the magazine, where they had originally been born and developed their devoted following. Fact 15. The movie started from a van sing-along. The entire 1991 Addams Family movie exists today because of a spontaneous moment that happened in the back of a van after a movie screening, proving that sometimes the best Hollywood ideas come from the most unexpected places. Scott Rudin, who was working as a development executive at 20th Century Fox at the time, was riding with several other high-ranking studio executives including studio chiefs Barry Diller and Leonard Goldberg, along with marketing chief Tom Sherrick, when something magical happened that would change entertainment history. During the ride, Tom Sherrick's young child randomly started singing the famous Addams Family theme song that had been stuck in people's heads since the original television series aired in the 1960s. What happened next surprised everyone in the van, as one by one, all the powerful Hollywood executives found themselves joining in with the kids' impromptu performance, singing along with every word and note, as if they had been rehearsing together for weeks. Rudin later told the Los Angeles Times that he was amazed to discover that everyone in the van knew the theme song perfectly, describing how they all sang it letter perfect, note for note, without missing a single word or musical cue. This unexpected group sing-along made him realize that the Addams Family had maintained a much stronger cultural presence than anyone in Hollywood had recognized, even though the original TV series had been off the air for more than 20 years by that point. The very next day, Rudin walked into Barry Diller's office and pitched the idea of making an Addams Family movie, and Diller's response was immediate and enthusiastic. There wasn't much debate or lengthy consideration needed, as Diller simply told Rudin to move forward with the project, leading to what would become one of the most successful film adaptations of a classic television series ever made.